even Esther, which is, as I mentioned, I shot with Alkan, my first feature film, I decided to build it like a series of very large tableau vivant, like living tableaus, and that each scene would be a single shot. I think that especially when you work out in this very charged the context of the Middle East, which is completely boiling, and we think that we know what is going on there. Because for me, we are in a stage of the news that the evening news become a fictional medium. It's not anymore. It's not. I think that in the 70s, television had an important role in telling us a lot of things and letting us sense different things. But since then, it became much more hermetic. And for me now, it's a kind of a show. You know, it's a show with all the codes of a show. And three kind of the Middle East, we together, Israelis and Palestinians, accept to be figurants, extras in this show. And in a way, for each side, for its own political reasons, accept to intoxicate the image of the other. Obviously, by doing it, we intoxicate the entire, we create a kind of a very directed image, very politicized image, not in a good sense. So I think if you do cinema in this context, you have to help the viewer work a bit and figure out things. So you have to put these big temporal blocks so the viewer can figure out things which otherwise you would not get. And I think then you contribute something to the understanding of the complexity of this conflict, of this situation of the Middle East.
Do you think your use of that long take has changed? Because as you were saying about Esther, it was almost a theatrical kind of scene. And then, you know, watching, say, Free Zone, which I think is on tonight, you know, it's the absolute opposite of that, isn't it? It's a very different kind of style.
Although, obviously, even Free Zone starts by this very long sequence shot with Natalie Portman, and so on and so on.
But there it really is like the camera is in the car with her. And
no, in these films, in these three films, I was trying to ask myself, each film is really different because Promised Land is different than Disengagement and different than Free Zone. But I intentionally wanted to deal with the question of hybridity, hybrid.
Right.
Because I think that there is nothing pure about it. And so I wanted in a way to break my tool somehow, and Free Zone is the one which is really in between piece. Because I think that when you travel everywhere you want, even here, it means that you have this kind of juxtaposition of old buildings, let's say even visually, being replaced by this mega structure, traces, and I'm sure Pimpin will speak to me about it, about architectural megastructure replacing old building. You want to, let's say, I'm myself not against modernity, but modernity created another tissue, visual tissue that we have to deal with. And in some way it has to be represented in cinema.
Yeah, just on a personal note, on the taxi here, I just passed Bugis where the 7 Stories Hotel is now gone. And I was very sad. But anyway, this is, just as you say, a very famous old building that's been destroyed to make way for a shopping centre, I believe. Let's talk about the Border trilogy then, since you brought them up, which is, I mean, they're very different, as you say, but they're obviously all about transport and moving from one place to another, and there are different modes of transport involved, from everything from the camel to the car to trains to being on foot. I suppose a film about travel brings to mind the genre of the road movie, which is usually an American genre, but it's been kind of refashioned all over the world. And the road movie, I suppose, makes one think about freedom, the freedom of the road. And obviously your films are very different. They're about the limits of freedom in some ways. Did you think about that as a genre when you were kind of putting those films together? Perhaps Free Zone is the most like a road movie of the three.
I mean, not completely in the terms that you articulated, but let's say when I went to do Free Zone, I said very briefly, the story is a story of a driver who used to work on my films. Politically, his opinions are very different than mine. And like he used to say, things not very pleasant about the neighbors, neighboring Arab countries and so on.
He was an Israeli.
Yeah. And then one day, I said to him, Ofer, what do you do? He said, I was unemployed, so I was looking for a job, I didn't find one. So finally I decided to import 4x4 American cars to my village. Then I will transform these 4x4 Chevrolets to armored vehicles myself. Then I will cross the border with Jordan, and I will sell it in East Jordan with a Palestinian partner to American securities who work in Iraq. Wow. So I told him, come on, this sounds like a science fiction. Let's. You are sure that that's what you're doing? And coming from the mouth of this guy, so it means that the economic constraint of the situation forced him to work hand by hand with a Palestinian partner in East Jordan, in an area that you know that crossing each border is a major project and so on. So I told him, listen, you know what? Next time you go, I want to sit in your car. I will be invisible unless you tell me, and I want to look at it. And I drove with him we went from Tel Aviv, we went along the Jordan River, we crossed the border, and then when we crossed the border, we started driving, and we passed Amman, and I see big signs saying Syria, Iraq, names that for me sounded really like hostile territory. And then in the middle of nowhere, I see this big sign saying Free Zone. And this is why it's called Free Zone. So it's this immense 1 square kilometer on the eastern desert of Jordan, in which they sell used cars. So we enter this Free Zone, and what do I see? I see buses, still with the big Israeli buses saying, vote for Sharon, and some Saudis are negotiating how much it is, you know. And then I see some ambulances with a sign of David, you know. And finally we get to his partner, and I see that he takes some sort of, he says, stay in the car because there are some Syrians and so on, you should not move. So I stay in the car, and I see that he takes a bag from the car, and I ask him what is in the bag. He said, Amos, the problem is that the kids of my Palestinian partner, they love Israeli yogurt. So I'm bringing them Israeli yogurt, you know. So I said, this is really a story because this is about crossing the borders, which I'm interested that we all make such a big fuss, but there are all sorts of currents which cross these borders.